This episode is brought to you by Energy Outreach Colorado. Energy Outreach Colorado is a statewide nonprofit helping income-qualified Coloradans pay their energy bills. They support hardworking families facing tough choices between paying utilities and buying essentials like food. Programs range from utility bill assistance to emergency furnace repair to community solar and energy efficiency work. Learn how Energy Outreach Colorado is creating affordable energy solutions for Coloradans at energyoutreach.org. That's energyoutreach.org. This episode is brought to you by the Vail Wine Classic. Head up to the mountains for this beautiful celebration of international wines and spirits, as well as Colorado's home favorites like Carboy Winery, Outer Range Brewing, and Woody Creek Distillers. Going down August 6th through the 8th, this big wine event features programming such as sommelier-led wine hikes, paired lunches and dinners at Vail's top restaurants, and an exclusive sunset showcase called Best of Fest, featuring 90-plus rated wines overlooking the Gore Range. Ticket prices go up as it gets closer to August, but you can save money right now by buying sooner. Just use code CITYCAST at checkout for $10 off. For tickets and a full schedule, visit vailwineclassic.com. And don't forget to use code CITYCAST for $10 off. Hey Denver, Bree here. At the end of today's episode, we've got a sponsored segment with TaskRabbit. Danny Feely is going to talk to me about home maintenance and how you can hire a trusted local neighbor to get it done. Welcome to CityCast Denver. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about. So today we're discussing the biggest races to watch in this month's primary, from the Weiser-Bennett battle for governor to the potential unseating of a decades-long incumbent in Congress, and so much more. Host of the Master Plan podcast and editor and founder of The Lever, David Sirota, hello.
Hi there.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We are in the midst of primary season, which is both enraging and exciting, I think, at the same time for us journalists. I don't know how you're feeling this deep into it.
Yeah, this is one of the more interesting years in Democratic primaries. So I'm interested.
Well, let's get into some of the more interesting races for sure. I mean, I think we've got to talk about the primary for Congressional District 1. Hands down, the race, to me, making the most waves. It's incumbent Diana DeGette against Melat Kiros and Wanda James. I mean, I'm going to be honest, anecdotally, I've heard from quite a few very politically active Denverites who I would usually peg as DeGette supporters, speaking really enthusiastically in their support of Melat Kiros. What are you thinking about this race, David?
I mean, I think that we're in a moment where the stench of D.C. is so foul that anybody who has that stench on them is potentially endangered. And that stench comes from both whether you're a politician who is an elected official, a current elected official in Washington, or you're endorsed or perceived to be handpicked and endorsed by the power brokers in Washington. And so I think that would explain, I think, why vibe-wise and at least some scattered polling data-wise, that both Melat Kiros and is doing better against Diana DeGette than. And again, this is perception. Then we perceive, we don't have results, but we perceive past Diana DeGette challengers have been doing. That's why I think Phil Weiser is, while being outspent, appears to be doing better than a lot of people expected him to be doing. Because again, Kiros is running against DeGette. Weiser is running against incumbent U.S. Senator Michael Bennet. And I think the sort of any affiliation with the status quo is a huge anchor around these people running for election or re-election. And so I think anybody running against that is getting a really significant boost.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about Weiser-Bennett in a minute, but I think what's interesting to me here is, like you kind of mentioned, this isn't the first time that DeGette has been challenged, right?
Right.
And and obviously, Melat's campaign, I have to say, social media-wise, they're crushing it. I am seeing her everywhere. I mean, not just like, campaign flyers and advertisements are one thing, but her physical presence in all of these different spaces. I just wonder, what is this they're still going up against issues we've been having. They're issues that progressives have been pushing back against for years. Why is it 2026 that feels or seems like it could be the breaking point for some of these establishment Democrats?
Well, because I think these establishment Democrats have not done a very good job of creating their own independent notoriety. I mean, I think that and which is hard to do, to be clear. But I think when you look at Diana DeGette is not the kind of incumbent who has done a very good job of creating like a Diana DeGette brand in Denver. Like, again, hard to do. And of course, the ultimate person who has done that effectively is somebody like Bernie Sanders in Vermont, right?
Sure.
I mean, Bernie Sanders, well before he ran for president, had established a kind of independent Bernie brand in the state of Vermont, where in bad years, when he was challenged, bad years for Democrats, when Republicans actually had a shot to win in Vermont, he could defy that trend because people in Vermont had a real sense, a real connection to him. I do not think that's the case with the typical Democratic Party incumbent right now across the country, in Colorado, and certainly in Denver. I do not think, when people think, who is Diana DeGette, I think a lot of people are like, I have no idea who that is. Or I think I've heard of that person. Maybe she's somewhere in Washington. I think that's the case for John Hickenlooper. I think that's also, frankly, the case in some ways for Michael Bennet. So I think, and again, I want to be clear, it is not easy to create an identity and a personal connection with voters that sets you apart or as distinct from just your party. That's not an easy thing to do. But I think if you haven't done that, then a year like this comes around where, for the first time really in my lifetime, I can remember Democratic voters, liberal voters, sort of liberal normie voters. Liberal normie voters have been very, very, for my whole lifetime, frankly, go along to get along with whoever the Democratic Party bosses say is the candidate. I think we're in a moment that feels really kind of unique.
Yeah.
In that liberal voters are like, wait a minute, I don't like my party. I don't like people who are affiliated with party leaders. And if they don't have an independent kind of brand that I recognize, that I have a sort of special connection to, they're just a sort of stand-in generic Democrat who's already in power, then that's at this point a count against them. It had been before, I think, where a Democratic incumbent had all the so-called powers of incumbency, the advantages of incumbency. Those are institutional. Oh, the sort of Democratic machine supports them. Liberal voters go along with the Democratic machine. That's gone, at least for the moment.
Yeah. Do you think that DeGette is relying too much on that, the incumbent, the name recognition? Because, I mean, I think she showed up to 2 debates out of the many that were hosted with the 3 candidates for her, you know, her and the incumbent, and then her and Melat and Wanda. And I just, like I was saying, the folks that I've been surprised by, I've talked about this on the show before, like my boomer mom and her friends who were like hardcore Hillary supporters, 10, 15 years ago, DeGette supporters. DeGette was up there with the Pat Schroeder, in the Pat Schroeder shrine. And my mom and her friends are even like, Melat is it, which I find so interesting. But also it's like, maybe it's speaking to what you're talking about, which is incumbency doesn't matter anymore if they're not saying things that seem to be relevant to, I think Melat's speaking a lot to what people feel are relevant issues that DeGette doesn't even have a presence in Denver enough to talk about.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I think what's made DeGette difficult to defeat in the past is that DeGette actually does have a decent voting record.
Sure.
So to my mind, DeGette's formula has been, I don't need to be all that present in Denver. I don't need to have a sort of a brand that people know and feel a connection to, because nobody can get to my progressive left on my voting record. And I think that really worked for a very, very long time. So it denied potential primary opponents something specific to grab onto. I think what we're here in the here and now, I think the thing that's being grabbed onto is you're just old and have been around a long time and you don't have a lot to show for it, and it's time for change. Like, I actually don't want to sound dismissive of individual issues, but I think we are living in a vibe-based attention economy, and I lament that. I deeply lament that. But I think inside of a vibe-based attention economy, sort of the just vibe of it's time for change. You've been there long enough. You don't have a ton of things to show for it that the community really feels identifies you with. I think that vibe is a huge part of what's going on. And I think we want to create election mandates. Melat is doing well because she is she supports this or that issue. It's not to say that hasn't helped. I'm saying it's like we're in the middle of like a huge sort of a tidal situation where the tidal situation, and I'm mixing metaphors here, but the tide, the vibe of, look, it's just time for change. Like Diana DeGette, just on paper, looks like everything that needs to be changed in the sense of has been there forever, what is she? She's going to turn 70 soon, I think. So not to say that she's like old and ancient.
Well, yeah, I was going to say that I feel the ageism in those comments too, which bothers me, not just from you. I mean, the general narrative. Yeah. However, I think, but what you're getting to at the root of it is she's been there for a long time and there's not a lot that has changed in some people's eyes. Yes, she's had marquee, moments with,
but like, can we take, I think the ageism thing is important because
let's talk about it.
Because it does cut across all the race. Like, it cuts across the Hickenlooper race, the U.S. Senate race. I think even with Michael Bennet, I mean, he's not as old as John Hickenlooper. Diana DeGette. I think it's not ageism to say, hey, listen, older people are disproportionately represented in our politics right now. Gerontocracy. And that is a problem. That I do think sort of representationally, that is an actual problem. And it's not ageist to say, hey, listen, we need some more young people or younger people.
I was just going to say, I feel like even our age group, Gen Xers, are not represented even because this older generation is still there. I guess, like, to me, it's just more about the difference between someone being old or someone just being in a space for too long. And
yes,
not
I mean,
ageism
would be, I don't think Diana DeGette, by virtue of her age, can do the job. I think Diana DeGette can do the job. I think, right? So it's not to say that they're incapable. I think what we're talking about is representationally. And I do think you're right. I mean, the Gen X thing I've been thinking a lot about. The boomers have held on to power for so long that I do think there's a real chance that the Gen X generation is going to be completely skipped over. Like, there is going to be zero. It's happening. We're going to go from the boomers holding on to power and just skip completely over our generation. I mean, we are truly like the lost generation.
Yeah. Which I mean, it's not just because this is our generation, but we do have something valuable to bring. We just haven't been able to even do that. But all that to say, I think another interesting point about the age part here is I hear from a lot of younger folks, especially, I'm like Melat. I wasn't even born when Diana DeGette was first elected. But what I hear in that is, how can she possibly know what my age group is talking about or what we need if she doesn't even have a presence in the city where she's representing? Because, like, Bernie is such a great outlier in this conversation, I think, to me, because he is such a sort of once in a generation type politician where, like, age doesn't really matter. I mean, I remember getting into him even before 2016 because of some of the work he and his wife had done in Vermont around DIY music venues. And I was like, these people are cool. But, like, he's an outlier as to where Melat is like, she's clearly speaking not just to Gen Z, but to millennials, to Gen X, to boomers. Like, she has nailed it. And one thing I do want to talk about really quickly is the money component, because let's talk about the attack ads part of this, because that's where it gets crazy to me. Is so DeGette maybe hasn't been showing up as much at these debates, but clearly her campaign is scared. The Sun recently reported that 3 DeGette aligned super PACs recently spent $1.3 million on attack ads against Kiros. And I imagine that's because they're feeling some pressure from this conversation.
100%. I mean, and I will say the slowness of DeGette to react to what's going on, it just kind of underscores, I think, how out of touch she seems to be in this moment as a politician. Like, how did you not see this coming? Like, you could see this coming from a mile away. And I think it's like there's the complacency in like, oh, I've had opponents before and they've never gone anywhere. And I think it's a failure to read the room and see that things have changed. I have said this before so many times very recently, which is that this is the first time in our lifetime that we see in polls consistently that liberal voters who for our entire lifetime have gone along with the anointed candidates of the Democratic Party, liberal voters now are feeling, you see it in the polls, they are deeply disillusioned and angry at their party, and that has created this space. I've been wondering where liberal voters have been for my whole life. Like, I don't really get it. I don't really understand why it's taken this long. But in a sense, that feeling, better late than never, because I do think in a democracy, some turnover is really healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think like maybe liberal voters weren't showing up because they weren't seeing in candidates anything that seemed any different. I mean, I think that's what's interesting about Melat Kiros is, again, she's taken from the Bernie playbook, but that works for a lot of not just younger voters. I mean, I don't know, I'm 45 and I was super interested in her campaign's approach in general. But I think the other thing I want to talk about here is just the attack ads between Democrats. Am I having amnesia or is this always this bad? Like, are the ads always this bad? I've gotten some really, really bad ones, some borderline racist ones, definitely ageist ones, definitely classist ones against Melat, where they're hammering home that she's just a barista. She's been a barista. And I'm like, do you know how many baristas are voting? A lot. Yeah,
I mean, yes, periodically things get pretty nasty between candidates in primaries. I'm not really surprised by that. I know there's been, I frankly think that we've gone through like an 8 or 10 year period where there was this idea of you're a bad person if you quote unquote go negative. That had become like this talking point in Democratic circles. Like, oh, the main thing we have to pledge to do is just not go negative in primaries. And I've always been like, why not? Like it's part of the way we choose people is kind of comparative, and the process itself tests these candidates. Like I don't have a problem with the so-called negativity as a general matter. I mean, I think some attacks are completely out of line. Some attacks do end up boomeranging on those who are making the attacks because they're saying more about the person who's making the attacks than they do about the person who's being attacked. Right? I do think like, oh, Melat Kiros isn't qualified because she's had a working class experience is like actually. The person, the side that's making that attack is actually saying more about themselves than they are about Melat, yes. Right? I mean, and it does go to this idea of what is representation, and I think again, I think this idea that someone far away in D.C. Who's been there forever, who isn't perceived to have a presence here, has relied on, I've cast, quote unquote, the right votes. And that's all, I haven't cast votes that are really out of step with the community. I think that's mostly fair to say about Diana DeGette. But that's not enough anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's definitely not.
Or it might not be. We don't know.
This episode is brought to you by Denver Health. Summer in Denver is incredible. The trails, the camping, the backyard projects, for me, weeding, constantly. But with all of that comes the occasional bump, stick, or tick bite that needs attention fast. That's where Denver Health Urgent Care comes in. Whether it's heat exhaustion after a hike, a sprain from the trail, or an insect bite that just doesn't look right, Denver Health Urgent Care is ready for whatever summer throws at you. With multiple convenient locations across Denver and virtual care available 7 days a week, getting the care you need has never been easier. And with summer sports leagues in full swing, Denver Health Urgent Care is ready for the sprains, strains, and sports injuries that come with the game, for kids and adults alike. Denver Health also has the only 24-hour pediatric urgent care in Denver, because kids don't exactly wait for business hours. Denver Health is with you for life's journey. Learn more at denverhealth.org/summer. That's denverhealth.org/summer.
Okay, so we're talking about the Democratic primary for the governor's race. So this week, Senator Michael Bennet disclosed a loan of nearly $1 million to his own campaign. And some experts warn that this could create a risk of, quote, quid pro quo corruption. David, can you explain what all this means?
Okay, so this is a really important issue. And it seems technical, but I'm going to walk you through some scenarios to explain why this is so important. So a few years ago, Ted Cruz gave himself a loan to try to create a Supreme Court case that would end the limits on candidates giving themselves loans. Why were there limits? Okay, there were limits because there was a concern that candidates lending themselves money would essentially become a conduit of corruption. Because here's the scenario. A candidate lends themselves money. They win re-election. Okay, their campaign now technically owes them, let's call it $1 million. Now that the donors to that candidate know that when they're donating money to that candidate, they're not just putting the money in the candidate's campaign committee. They're putting money in the candidate's, potentially, into their pocket, into their personal bank account, because the money that goes into the campaign is then used to retire the debt, aka pay the candidate back for their debt. There were allegations in the past that candidates were lending themselves money at high interest rates to actually do this so that their donors were not only replenishing their personal bank account, but replenishing it at high interest rates so that the candidates were actually profiting off of this scheme. Okay, so Ted Cruz gives himself a loan to try to, above what was then the federal limits, to engineer a Supreme Court case to get the court to strike down this anti-corruption law. Okay, and the Supreme Court does that. So the Supreme Court at the federal level struck down the anti-corruption law. The good government anti-corruption groups went in, begged the Supreme Court not to do this. They did it. Now it exists. And to give people a really good example of how this was used, we at The Lever broke this story. You might remember that Donald Trump appointed Billy Long, a guy named Billy Long, to be the head of the IRS. Billy Long had been a congressman who had run for Senate and lent himself about $100,000, maybe $120,000 years ago, and never retired the debt. So Billy Long was out $120,000. Billy Long gets nominated to be the IRS chief. And what do you know? A bunch of tax prep companies and the like, those with business before the IRS, all of a sudden into the old campaign committee flowed a bunch of campaign contributions into Billy Long's, sort of defunct campaign committee to put $100,000+ into Billy Long's pocket to retire his personal debt. All of that is context, I think, for what's gone on in Colorado, where Michael Bennet lent himself his campaign, what was it, $950,000?
Close to $1 million, yeah.
Yeah, close to $1 million. Okay. And the key is he didn't donate it to himself, right? That's different. He
loaned it to himself.
Right. Loaning. If you donate it, you're not getting the money back. You're donating it. And we've seen, self-funded candidates. When we talk about self-funded rich candidates, they're donating it to themselves. So Michael Bennet loans himself money, which means that technically, if he's elected governor, that donors potentially with business before the governor could donate to retire his debt, which again, they would donate to his campaign, but it would be for debt retirement, where that money then goes back to replenish the money that Michael Bennet has lent his campaign. Now, here's the other wrinkle. And this is where it's actually different than most other situations, where typically when a candidate lends themselves money, there is some risk, right? You're lending yourself money and you're thinking, hey, listen, I'm lending myself money. Andrew Romanoff, good example. Andrew Romanoff mortgaged his house when he ran for Senate way back against Michael Bennet in 2010. Andrew Romanoff's, the deterrent to that is if you're lending your campaign money and you lose, you're probably not going to be able to get your campaign debt paid back because donors have no motivation to give you money. Right? So the deterrent is maybe I shouldn't loan myself money because I might lose. Well, Michael Bennet is a current U.S. Senator. So if Michael Bennet, there's a heads I win, tails my donors lose kind of situation here, where Michael Bennet lends himself money for the gubernatorial race. If he loses, he's still in the Senate and he's on the most powerful tax writing committee in the Senate. Michael Bennet could easily tell his prospective donors who want things from the Senate, the U.S. Senate, hey, listen, don't give to my Senate campaign. First and foremost, give to my now defunct, I lost my gubernatorial campaign to help me retire my debt. So, and I want to be clear, I'm not saying Michael Bennet is doing this.
Yes, this is speculation. I mean, we should be clear. Yes.
Right. I'm not saying he's doing this. And I think Michael Bennet has campaigned on some things that I think have been great for him to campaign, healthcare reform and the like. I've personally tried to sort of look at this race and not thumb on the scale it. And I think, both candidates have run decent races. But I'm just spotlighting here this situation, which is when a candidate lends themselves money, there is this problematic possibility of donors having a new conduit to be able to put money into a politician's personal bank account. And that's it's the Ted Cruz loophole. That's why there were anti-corruption laws. And so I think it raises real questions.
Yeah. Well, I do just want to say Bennett's campaign's response to this speculation. The Colorado Sun reported, quote, Michael's investment in this campaign reflects his commitment to ensuring Coloradans hear about his positive vision to reject the status quo and deliver results, says Nellie Moran, Bennett's campaign manager. And Moran also argued the loan was necessary to combat the money Weiser's campaign is spending on TV and digital ads attacking Bennett, which I find interesting.
Look. My question would then be, okay, why isn't he donating the money? Why is he lending? Why is he loaning himself the money? Right? Like donating the money, it's like, listen, I get it. Okay, like people do that. It's the decision to loan the money that I think is I have questions about. And it's not to say I think Michael is corrupt. It is to say that I think it's sort of like I'm loaning it knowing that I can get it, leaving open the possibility that I can get it back. And I think that's a real question. And then I would also say on the look, every campaign needs more money, right? No matter what. But the idea that like Phil Weiser is outspending Michael is that's ridiculous, right? I mean, Michael Bennet has a very, very well-funded dark money super PAC that has been spending a ton of money on this race. I think if you've turned on your television, you've seen that. I mean, Phil Weiser has also spent money, has a well-funded campaign as well. So the idea that like the insinuation that Michael Bennet is the financial underdog in this campaign, I mean, that just doesn't hold water like on the merits.
Yeah, I found that comment interesting too. Well, let's talk about Phil Weiser really quick. Is Phil Weiser as progressive as he says he is? Because honestly, based on my algorithm, when I jump in to Instagram, it seems he's spending a lot of time in progressive spaces and really trying to appeal to a progressive audience. But when it gets down to like who these guys are Weiser and Bennet that different when it comes to progressive issues?
So my concern with this race the entire time, and I have told this to Phil Weiser and I've told it to Michael Bennet, is that I feel like this has been in some ways a Seinfeld campaign. It's been about nothing. which isn't exactly fair. Like they've put forth policies and the like, but they've been battling each other. Who's more anti-Trump? That's been sort of the conversation. Oh, he voted for Trump nominees, and oh, Phil didn't sue Trump enough, and like who is going to do what as governor, and how is it different than both Jared Polis, and how is it different? How is Michael different from Phil? How is Phil different from Michael? I think this hasn't really been enough a part of the campaign. I mean, I was very happy to see a set of healthcare policies and proposals that Michael Bennet put forward. I think Michael Bennet would take healthcare extremely seriously as governor, which I think is extremely appealing. I think Phil Weiser saying that he putting forward policies as it relates to trying to limit the effect of Citizens United in Colorado, money in politics. I think that's been fantastic. That really hasn't been the conversation. And so it's all speculation of what these people would actually do as governor. But I also think this. I think that Phil Weiser has relied on the idea, the same thing we were talking about earlier, which is that there is a desire for change. And I think that desire, to be clear, is very legitimate. I think Michael Bennet, being a sitting U.S. senator, running for governor, saying Michael Bennet being an appointed senator himself originally, saying he's going to appoint the next senator, and the U.S. House members waiting around and sort of revolving around Bennet. Sort of in this Game of Thrones game where they're in his ads. Clearly, they're trying to position themselves as his nominee. I kind of think like this as a process isn't great. And this
I was just going to say,
think,
this is not what progressive voters want to hear either, is more vacancy committees, more appointed positions.
Right. Vacancy, appointed senators, and, like the political machine working in the way it's working, and everyone, the ladder and the whole structure. And it really is a machine. Like, I think this is ultimately what Phil Weiser is positioning himself as a solution to. So I can't, that's all a long way of saying I can't give you an answer on exactly how these two people would be different as governor. But I can say, I think, look, we're living in a deep blue state in which we have, the political system is so locked down. It's been so locked down for so many years that there's now, in terms of the ladder and wait your turn, and right, like I think Phil Weiser is benefiting from that, and I think that machine up and down the ballot does need a shaking. It's not good for like you can't decry the democracy crisis on one hand. And then say, hey, listen, it's cool that like it's a wait your turn political machine, appointed senators, vacancy committee. Like those two things are in tension. And I think Phil Weiser is positioning his campaign as at least a pushback against that.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to look at it. And I would love to dig into this deeper. We don't have time, but we'll have more conversations about, say Bennet wins, then there is this appointee situation. And that's what is that? How does that bode?
Can I just say the one thing about Bennet I want to put out there too,
sure.
Which is like my best hope for a Michael Bennet, okay, is that yes, the process is sort of very old and top down and kind of gross
and kind of behind closed doors to me.
Behind closed doors,
yes, and very not transparent to the voter. Yeah.
Yes, very establishment-y.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's like all the old tricks of the establishment and the incumbent. I would say my hope for Michael Bennet is if he wins, he is in his traitor to his class phase of his political career, like his sort of FDR phase of his career, where he's already been a senator, he's been in politics for a long time, he's sort of over the frills and the supposed glamour of it, and he's just ready to like go to town in a real and positive way on a few issues. That is my hope for Michael Bennet. I don't know if that hope is naive, but that's at least what I would be hoping for from him.
Well, we'll be watching this. We've got, I think, less than a week until primary ballots are due. If you have not filled yours out yet, please do. I can't wait to see the turnout on this primary, honestly. I think it'll be really interesting. David Sirota, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, and don't forget, check out our weekly newsletter, Keep It Local, spotlighting local businesses, dropping in inboxes this afternoon. Newsletter editor Michelle Palizzi has rounded up some great places to play putt-putt, both indoors and outdoors. And thanks to our sponsors of Keep It Local, Denver Economic Development and Opportunity and the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce. Hey, it's Bree Davies, and I'm here with Danny Feely, the Director of Finance at TaskRabbit. Hi, Danny.
Hey, Bree, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too. So for folks who haven't used TaskRabbit yet, give us the pitch. What is it? And what are Denverites actually using it for the most right now?
So TaskRabbit is a platform where you can find a skilled local tasker to help you with all kinds of tasks around your house. Think furniture assembly, TV mounting, those are huge, especially with so many people moving into new spaces lately. But we also handle cleaning, moving help, and general home repairs.
Awesome. It sounds so easy. So you're from Denver, so you've watched this thing expand from the inside. How have you seen this platform grow?
Yeah, it's been really incredible. We've actually helped Denverites complete more than 105,000 tasks over the last couple of years. From Rhino to Wash Park, we've become the reliable neighbor-to-neighbor resource for when life gets busy. We grew from a simple idea 16 years ago when our founder just needed dog food on a snowy night. And we are now the #1 platform for home services. So definitely huge growth and really interesting to see from the inside.
So, like the logistics side, how does TaskRabbit support local workers here in Denver?
Definitely. That is a huge part of our mission, so I'm really glad you asked. We aren't just a service, we're an engine for micro entrepreneurs. On average, taskers in Denver earn $49 per hour. That's a fantastic way to build a business or make some extra money on the side. Taskers are their own bosses. They set their own rates, their own schedules, and work areas, and most importantly, they take home 100% of their hourly rate and 100% of their tips.
Oh, see, this is all helpful to know. I'm thinking about it right now. Someone is listening and they're going, wait, I could get paid to do this. So who is the right fit for TaskRabbit and what does signing up actually look like?
So if you're over 18 and you have a skill, whether it's painting, mounting, or just being handy around the house, we want to hear from you. We handle the back-end logistics so that you can focus on the work. We also take safety really seriously. So every tasker goes through a multi-step vetting process, including identity verification and background checks.
That's really, really good to know. Well, Danny, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much, Bree. Really appreciate the time.
And again, check out taskrabbit.com to learn more. We'll have a link for you in our show notes as well, so you're just a click away. Thanks for listening. That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed this show, why not take a minute to tell an unaffiliated voter about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts, follow us on Instagram and TikTok, and subscribe to our morning newsletter at denver.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See you later.